Hi, my name is Paul Shalev, and I've been working on a potter's wheel for 53 years. This year I looked online to see what beginning throwing was like. I saw some YouTube videos, and most of them were really good. Most of those beginning videos are great, except most people who've learned to throw pottery in schools have not learned the safest way of throwing pottery. If you think about folk potters, they have to work every day. They can't get by without making 50, 80, I've seen as many as 400 pieces a day off the potter's wheel. In a school, 5, 8, 10, 20 seems like a lot. But 20 an hour or 20 every 20 minutes is more usual for a functional potter. So I noticed that there were certain issues, certain health issues that were not addressed, and I'd like to address those in this video. The first issue I'd like to discuss is the use of your wrists, which might cause carpal tunnel syndrome. The second issue I'd like to discuss is how to hold your back, which can cause lower back problems. And the third issue I'd like to discuss in this demonstration is how to use your body and the ergonomics of the wheel and your body to gain strength without having to use your musculature. So let's start with carpal tunnel syndrome. If you keep your thumb in line with your radius and ulna, you will not get carpal tunnel syndrome. If you bend your thumb at an angle to your radius and ulna, you most likely will get carpal tunnel syndrome. So how do you push the clay without bending your wrists? How do you keep your wrists straight? Well, we have to think of a different way of using our body. So instead of pushing, where our muscles up here are pushing our hands way down there, we're going to use torque. And torque is just taking your hands on, keeping your thumb in line with your radius and ulna, and twisting in. We're going to torque to push the clay up rather than push. The second is where you keep your elbows to do this. Well, some people have, on some of the videos I saw, they've taught you to jam your elbows against your body or put your elbow against your knee. Well, if your elbows are not free, then you're not breathing properly, and you can't work all day long. You can work for a couple of hours, maybe 3 or 4 hours, and you'll get exhausted because you're putting tension in your arm. You're flexing your arm the whole time. The only thing that should flex when you're working on the potter's wheel is your hand. Your arm should be loose. Where do your elbows go? Lift your shoulders and let them drop. And that's where your elbows go, where they're most comfortable, right where they always are. They don't jam in, they don't go out, nothing. Just drop them, and they'll be fine. Third, your back. How do you prevent yourself from getting lower back problems? Your lumbar region will get destroyed if you bend like this and try to use your power. What you want to do is keep your back straight and bend from your groin area, from your hip. Don't bend your back, don't curl it in, keep it straight and bend forward. When you throw, your face should be over the clay and the weight of your body should be pushing on your hands so that you don't have to use that much strength. You can use just your body weight. All of us have a little body weight. Some of us have more than others. Okay, so I'd like to address those 3 issues primarily, but I'll show you some other things too. So those 3 issues, once again, are how to hold your wrist, how to hold your back, and how to use your body for maximum advantage. If you're a beginner, then you'll start with a ball of clay. This is porcelain. I just didn't have any clay for throwing today, but you start with a ball of clay, and you want to throw it down on the potter's wheel and have it adhere. If the bat that you have has no finish on it, then you'll have to dampen it. And you can use a sponge to just gently dampen it. If it's reflecting, it's too wet. if you take the reflection off and it's just a little bit damp, it's perfect. So notice that I keep a towel with me all the time so that I have options. I don't have to get up off the wheel to get my towel. My tools are here. I don't have to get up off the wheel to get my tools. When I finish making my pieces, I can put them on a board. I don't have to get up off the wheel to get the board. In the best of all situations, when I'm sitting at my regular wheel over there, rather than a student type wheel, I also have my radio controls, my music controls, and all my tools and everything within arm's reach. So until 2 boards are filled, which is 20 pieces, I never have to get up off the wheel. Okay, so I'm going to throw this down, but let's look at this carefully. If we look, one part has cracks in it, and one part is smooth. It's not a block, it's not a cube, it's a sphere. If I threw the cracked part down, I'd already start a crack in the bottom of my piece. So I take the very best part of that sphere, the part that has no cracks, and I put it down on the wheel hard. Now I can start the wheel. I can turn it on and start it slowly. Oh my God, it's not centered. How am I going to center it? Well, we can solve this problem just by, before we put water on our hands, tapping it a little bit. This serves 2 purposes. One is it adheres the clay to the bat, and 2, it centers it maybe 75%. So we've already reduced our workload by 25% just by a few taps. If you noticed when I was tapping, my wrist was straight. I was not tapping like this. I wasn't so afraid that I don't have enough strength that I brought my hands in like that. My elbows are free. I can extend out. If my elbows were here, I couldn't extend out. That's why they're free. Okay, now that I have this tapped sort of in place, I can take a little water. Water is the lubricant. Use a lot of it. It's generally fairly free still until Coca-Cola takes over. And I want you to put your hands across the clay like this. Not use your fingers. Use the meaty part of your palm. Why? This is weak, and this is powerful. This meaty part of your palm is meaty because it's muscle. It's solid muscle with no joints in it. There are no joints that will move. If we think of the physics of it, if we take this piece of clay and make a mark on it, and make a couple of arrows, we're going to be pushing from the outside in towards the center. If we push right at the center point of this clay, and let's say we're putting 4 pounds of pressure here and 4 pounds of pressure there, when we come together, we're getting 8 pounds of pressure in the center of that clay. If I would push by keeping my elbows in at this angle, let's say at a 90-degree angle, and I put 4 pounds here and 4 pounds there, then what happens is I'm only getting 6 pounds of pressure in the center and 2 pounds going out the other side where I have no control. I'm going to use less strength. If I bend my back straight, use my body, get my face over it, and gently push in from the sides with the palm, the meaty palm, not the fingers. Meaty palm. It's not comfortable because you're not used to doing that, but you'll see that it'll soon become obvious why it works very well. So I'll spin the wheel. What's the speed that you spin the wheel? What speed should you spin the wheel? If you go full force, then the centrifugal force, if you're off a little bit, might throw it off. There is a force pushing out when something's spinning. So I generally tell students to go at about half speed. So I'll call this 55 miles an hour. And if you go faster, you're speeding, I give you a ticket. My back is straight, my head is over the clay, I'm putting my palms here, and I'm not going to push from my shoulder muscles. I'm not going to do that. I'm simply going to torque. So I'm going to torque, and when I torqued, I made a dent. And then once I have that dent, I can raise that dent up. I can take my right hand, put my thumb over the center, my left hand, put it over my right, not interlocked, but right hand, then left hand. The reason the right goes first is that the clay flows off your fingertips, not into your fingertips. It doesn't catch. So if you're a little bit off, it won't catch. Right hand, thumb over the top, the bottom of the thumb over the top of the clay. That's my guide. My left hand crossed over, my back straight. I'll lean over and use my body weight to allow my hands to go down. If it didn't work, do it again. Again, all the way out here, torque. Lift it up, wrists as straight as possible. Right hand, left hand, back straight, face over the clay. Let your body weight push your hands down. Let your body weight push you down. And we've got the clay centered. What happens if it didn't work? Do it again, and again, and again, and again. The more you do it, the better you're going to get at this. Lift it up, push it down. Lift it up, push it down. Lift it up, push it down. Look where I'm bending. I'm bending from my hips. I'm not bending my back. Okay. We have a centered piece of clay, and I want to make a hole in it. I'm always going to use two hands, because if I use two hands to do anything on the clay, I'm triangulating. I'm coming from two directions, and I'm keeping my fingers steady. No matter what the clay does, if it's off center or whatever, my hands are not going to get thrown around. The feeling of center is something you can feel just like the balance of riding a bike. If you run your finger down, you can feel where the center is. Even if the clay is way off, you can feel where the center is. It's like a balance. You feel it. It's not something you really see. If you're very experienced, you can see it, but it's not something you really see in the beginning. So again, if it's off, let's bring it up, let's bring it down, let's bring it up, let's bring it down. Let's find that center point. I'm going to take the tip of my thumb while my hands are secured to the outside of the clay. I'm going to take the tip of my thumb and I'm going to use my left hand to push my right thumb down to make a hole in the clay. So I'm just making the hole in the clay. Notice that I'm keeping the clay damp. That's my lubricant. How deep do you go? Leave about 3/8 of an inch of clay, maybe a half an inch, depending upon the size of the piece you're making. How do you know how thick it is? Well, you make many, many of them. Some are going to be too thin, some are going to be too thick, and eventually you'll learn. Or you can measure it with a pin tool. This is what a lot of people learn to do, is put the pin tool in, see how deep it goes, measure the pin hole, smush up that hole, and then just go again. Okay, so I have a V-shaped hole in my block of clay. This is the part that most beginners forget, and this is probably the most important part in the beginning of throwing, and that is to widen the bottom before you start bringing up the walls. This is not the time to bring up the walls. This is the most important step. Widen the bottom. How do you widen the bottom? Many ways that'll work. Let's take the fingers of my left hand and put them in, feeling for center. And if I take my fingers and pull them to my thumb, I'm using hardly any energy. I'm not using my arms, I'm not pulling with my body. I'm just closing my fist. I'm not pulling my thumb to my fingers, I'm pulling my fingers to my thumb. So I'm going to take my hand in there, guide it with my right hand, my left hand is in, my fingers pull towards the thumb, and the bottom is now flat and wide. And now I can throw my cylinder. This is also the time to be able to smooth out and clean your cylinder, clean your bottom. Supposing I went too far. Oh no, I went too far, it went off center. What am I going to do? Well, you have two choices. You can go jump out the window, or you can fix it. Everything is choice. To fix it, simply make a mold with your hand. Take your other hand to secure it. Slowly close that mold over the ring of clay. Slowly close that mold over the ring of clay. It goes back to center. The two hands are triangulating, so they're holding steady. I'm touching the clay, but not pushing against it, and then slowly close it so the clay has time to flow through that mold 30 or 40 times around before you've completely centered it. Notice that my wheel is now going a little slower than it was when I was centering. As you throw, the wheel slows and slows and slows for each successive part of throwing. We're going to do the same thing we did before. Remember, I made a dent and then raised it up. I torqued and made a dent. This time I'm going to make a dent with the longest finger of my right hand. And all I've done is make a little dent. You can see the dent in the clay. And then I'm going to take my hands and raise them together. When I get to the lip, I'm not going to go up over the lip. I'm going to float away to the sides. Let's do that again. A dent. Once I have that dent, I'm going to raise the clay up, get to the lip, float to the sides. Again, push that clay in, get to the lip, float to the sides. Let's say you made a mistake. Oh no, it went out too far. Oh my God, how am I going to get it back in? How many of you have had brothers and sisters? You've had a brother or a sister. If you were the older brother or the older sister, you were the strangler. If you were the younger brother or younger sister, you were the stranglee. When you strangled your brother or sister, or they strangled you, they didn't take their two hands and say, "Oh, you're so cute, I love you." They took their hands like this, elbows out, one ring of contact, a single ring of contact. If we take a single ring of contact, we keep this, and we slowly work our way up, the clay will come back in. Notice the wheel is slowing even more. Again, I'm going to take the clay, raise it up, and I've thrown basic cylinder. Let's say the lip went off. Oh my God, the lip went off and it won't go back. It's so uneven. You know, what am I going to do? Again, we have various choices. We can go up to the point just under the lip, take our pin tool. These are the commercial pin tools, and they have a pretty wide pin. It may be difficult for you. This is one I've had for 45 years. It has a very narrow pin. It'll have less resistance. Slowly, slowly pass it through until we cut a little ring of clay off. Save the clay. Okay, this is the basic cylinder. Where do we go from here? We can push out to widen it. We can neck in to get it in. Let's make a simple piece. Push out to widen it. Notice that I went twice. I widened it twice. It's better to go gently twice than one time full force. I notice that there's water in the bottom of my piece. Oh my gosh. Dry out my sponge. Take out the excess water, because if I'm going to neck it in, I won't be able to get my hands back in there. Neck it in. When you neck it in, it gets thicker. You can bring it back up. basic pot. Let's say you're a perfectionist. I want it really clean. I hate those throwing rings. What do? We can take a tool like this flexible metal rib. And it's got beautiful curves in it. And we can flex it to whatever curves we want and take out all of the throwing rings if you want. I want it to glaze beautifully. How do I get it to glaze beautifully? You take this very fine slip that you were throwing with, you put it on a chamois, and you gently run the chamois down the piece. Those are the finest particles of clay. You've now covered your piece with the finest particles of clay. If you take a scraping tool to shape it and just leave it like that, then what you're doing is scraping off the finest particles of clay and leaving the roughest particles. When you glaze your piece, it's going to be a little duller. When you use the finest particles of clay, it's going to be a little brighter. What do I do with my lip? I also can take my chamois, make a lip. Okay, how can I get this off the wheel? I can take a knife in my left hand, potter's knife. These potter's knives I make out of old kitchen knives. Guide it with my right. Again, never use one hand by itself, especially with a tool. Follow the form down to the bat. Cut the excess ring of clay off. Use your wire. Oh. If you want to lift your piece, dry your hands. It won't slip out of your hands. Piece number one. Okay, this is not my regular throwing area. I've just built this so that I could use a student type wheel and show you in a way that will be more clearer for you. Okay. In real time, what does it take to throw a piece? So without all the talking, I'm going to make the ball. I'm going to look at the ball. It has a crack here. I'm not going to throw that part down. It's smooth there. I don't have to take the little past piece of clay off. My hands are dry from drying them with a towel. I'm going to pat them in the center. I'm going to wet my piece, wet my hands, sit up straight, get my face over the clay, make a dent, bring that dent up. Again, make a dent with torquing, bring that up. Right hand over, left hand crossing, face over the clay, push down a bit. Do it a second time or a third time. Going to make the hole with my thumb. The hole is a V-shaped hole, not a narrow hole. I'm going to take the fingers of my left hand, spread the bottom, clean the bottom a little bit, hook my two thumbs together, bend my fingers, bent fingers. Make a dent with the outside finger. The inside is just guiding. The fingers are exactly opposite each other. Not like this, not like that. Exactly opposite each other. My middle finger makes a dent, and I pull up the clay. Let's say that's too hard for me to do. I could use a knuckle and a finger. I could use two knuckles. If it's getting too wide, neck it in by strangling it. Don't use many points of contact. Use one ring of contact. A ring of contact, you can bring it up and in. You want to go into your clay, wet your hand, so that when you go in, it doesn't, the surface tension doesn't grip. I'll widen it a bit. Narrow it a bit. When I neck it in, it thickens. Oh, my top is a little bit off. Second way to cut a ring off is with a wire. There are many ways of doing everything. The way you've learned to throw is correct. It's fine, whatever it is. I'm showing you one technique of many that are good. All of the techniques that I saw on YouTube are fantastic, except they didn't take into account your back, your wrist, and your strength, how to use your strength. Dry your hands. Okay, there's one last thing I want to show you. And we'll take a break now, and then I'll show you in a second. Okay, the last part of this demo is, why is this a good way of throwing? Well, it's a good way of throwing because your wrists will survive, your back will survive. You won't overuse your body, so you can make a lot of work. And fourthly, you can use this technique to throw almost any amount of clay. So if we wanted to center a larger block of clay, let's say 12 or 14 pounds, we'd use the exact same technique. We don't have to change it. Stick it down, work your hands up. A dent and raise. Okay. But before I throw a large piece, I'd like to show you what you can do with this block of clay. These are Korean throwing sticks. They're called Kautang Hera. Let's see my, oh, here it is. My chamois. I thought it fell in the pot of water. Okay, I want to analyze what I've done. So I've thrown a bowl with it. I've also made the foot ring, and I've underlined the foot ring, so now I don't have to trim the foot ring down except for the inside of it. The lip of the bowl is made, and to get it off the potter's wheel, I'll simply use a piece of kite string not a wire, a piece of kite string with one end that's been burned so it's fused. Slip it under that mark that I made as the bottom of my foot ring, pull it through once, and you have bowl number 1. This setup I built is the seat is a little too far from the potter's wheel for me. Pull the bowl out and up, but not quite as much as you need it completely. This porcelain doesn't make great slip. They took out the kaolin and they put in some kind of chemical. Pull up. Shape it by using your wrist, twisting your wrist. If you always go the same way, you get the same shape. Take care of the lip. Soften the sides for nice glazing. Make your foot ring mark. Take your string, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6. When I first learned this, I learned it in Japan working with Takashi Nakazato. And the first day that I saw him work, he made almost 400 pieces. And that was a relaxed day. That was relaxed. It was the light in his studio. The light came over his shoulder. He wasn't looking at the view. The view was actually shedding light onto him. He was looking into the studio. The boards were on either side. An apprentice would bring the clay and put the clay there. He'd put it on the wheel. He'd throw a whole bunch of pieces off the hump. Somebody would take the board away. He'd do another one. His seat was actually pliable. It was plywood. It was flexible, so his back didn't get hurt. And his stereo switches were there, and all his tools were laid out perfectly, always the same. So that the variables were reduced, so his constant was just, his only variable was how well can I make this piece. Anyway, the big piece. So we can take this piece of porcelain, bring it up the same way, thumb hole. Because it's too big for my thumb to go all the way down, I'm going to use the fingers of my left hand and take my 3 fingers and put them around my longest finger. Feel for the feeling of center and just slide my hand down. Okay, I've gotten down to the bottom. I've made a V-shaped hole. I'm going to go in there with my knuckle, widen it, bring my knuckle towards me to widen it evenly. Knuckle goes down slowly. The bottom is wide now and flat. For this kind of work, I generally will use a sponge on the outside, and so that I can work all the way up the cylinder. I don't have to stop to get more liquid. And I'll keep the cylinder narrow enough so that my hand just fits in. You can always widen it. It's more difficult to make it narrow once it's wide. Okay, for shaping a large porcelain piece, you don't want it to stay really wet because it'll collapse. So I'll generally use 2 throwing tools, wooden throwing tools. Oh. Round one on the inside, flat one on the outside. Bring it up and out. Bring it up and out. Try to keep my shapes fairly even. Not like that. That'll be more difficult to throw. Okay. Okay, our standard pot. Notice there's a little bit of water in there. I'll take it out. Okay. Anyway, that's it. Thank you very much. Throw safely, throw well, and have a great time. Bye.